Hello, I'm SB Moores, and I want to make another video about Malazan and in specific about the Bone Hunters and one aspect about the Bone Hunters that I really enjoyed, kind of a little bit of an analysis in it, but not mostly about the parallels that can be drawn from the prologue and the epilogue of the Bone Hunters to the rest of the text of the book because I believe that the epilogue especially is a really good ending for this book, and I feel like it has one of the best final lines of any of the Malazan books, aside from maybe Memories of Ice, with Duiker regaling his tale of the chain of dogs. But I really enjoyed the epilogue of this book, and it really ties together with the prologue, and that's the first thing I will talk about. But let me explain what happens in the prologue and the epilogue, if which I would hope you're aware. This is obviously full spoilers for everything in the Bone Hunter, since it deals with the very first scene and then the exact last line. So, but in the prologue of the Bone Hunters, we are not actually on Seven Cities or Malaz Island, which is where a good three quarters and then a quarter of the book takes place. We're on Kartul Island to the north of Malaz Island. And it essentially is just following Hellion, who we obviously know is one of the Bone Hunters, as she's a city guard there with Touchy and Breathless, or Herb and Breathless, or Touchy, Herb and Breathless. I think it might be all three. But it involves them being approached by Banishtar, who they don't really know who he is at this point. He's just a mysterious man who comes in and explains, "Oh, you got to go to the temple." And then there's a bunch of dead priests of Direk in the Temple of Direk, which is closed off to the people of Kartul. I'm pretty sure it's outlawed there. But one detail that's very important that gets mentioned time and time again is attention is drawn to the sprawling spider webs above the city that scintillate and stretch from tower to tower of Kartul City, and the giant Peralt spiders, which are poisonous, that roam them, because Hellion is quite scared of them, and I think she gives that as her reason for never leaving Kartul, even though she hates the spiders, is that there are spiders on boats, and on a boat there's nowhere to go, which scares her even more than, I guess, living among them. But because at least she can run across the island to get away. But Banishtar disappears, and Hellion kind of bemoans it and realizes that her Touchy, Breathless, and Herb are going to be sent to one of the Malazan front lines, one of the theaters, the conquest that they're doing. She's particularly scared of getting sent to Coral or Seven Cities. Obviously, she gets sent to Seven Cities, which we know is really bad. Coral, it's mentioned that the situation there is bad. We don't know anything about it. She just mentions the storm wall. Obviously, Faradin's sword is from the storm wall, apparently based off of her sword. Other than that, we don't know anything about it. I'm pretty sure that gets dealt with in novels of the Malazan Empire, but I have not read it, so I don't know. And then the epilogue actually takes us back to Kartul after all the events of the book, and follows a character we've never seen called the Master Investigator, who's also investigating the same thing that Hellion was, which is the murders of those priests of Direct, the deaths. And it's kind of ironic, he comes to the exact same conclusion that Hellion does, is that they all must have committed suicide together, like a mass suicide. And it's kind of ironic that he comes to the same conclusion that Hellion does, but Hellion gets sent to a front line. Although it is mentioned by the commanding officer or whatever that she was a drunk, and I think that played a big part in why she got sent away. But the spider imagery reappears here, especially in the last line, which I'm going to read real quick just because it's so interesting. But the last paragraph and line read, while a score of huge spiders, crouched in their small caves dug into the walls of the towers, looked with cold, multifaceted eyes, looked down upon all that crawled below, occasionally curious, ever patient, even as the sweet whispers of hunger flitted through their liquid brains. The webs were set, and the traps, in their elaborate elegance, were never empty for long. This ends the sixth tale of the Malazan Book of the Fallen. Now, that's basically the crux of why I find the epilogue and the prologue of this book so interesting, and how there's so many parallels that can be drawn with the imagery and the symbolisms of everything that's going on, and the foreshadowing kind of in the prologue with the spider webs. Because what is a spider web? It's a trap. It's a snare meant to capture prey. And the Bone Hunters, I think, is best encapsulated as just a series of traps that get set off throughout the book. And I'll go into detail about that. But one reason that I really enjoy the prologue and the epilogue, besides these parallels, is that they feel the most self-contained to the specific book that it's talking about of all of the prologues and epilogues in the series. Take Memories of Ice, for example. Prologue is about Calor and about some elder gods that are pertinent to the events of what happens in Memories of Ice, but the epilogue doesn't really touch upon any of that. It's just touching upon the events of the wider book itself, reminiscing on how deadly and insane and truly terrible the events of the Panion War was, and the battle at Coral and Capistan and all that. And then it ends with Duiker telling us, or he's finally not catatonic, and he just goes, if you want a tale to break your hearts, I have one. And he just goes, I will tell you of Cultane of the Wiccan Crow clan, newly come fist to the 7th Army, and the Chain of Dogs, which is a great ending for Memories of Ice, I should add. I love all the endings of every book. I think every book has a really good epilogue. The only one that I couldn't really speak on quite as much these days is probably Gardens of the Moon. It's been so long. I know that really liked the ending of the last chapter, but I forget what the epilogue of that book is. I think it's about Circle Breaker, reminiscing or talking about something with the eel, or thinking about talking about something with the eel, but I don't remember if I particularly enjoyed that one quite as much. But something uh, that I really like is how connected the prologue and the epilogue are for the Bone Hunters, and how connected they are to the book. Because um, even though the epilogue doesn't really have anything to do with the events of the book per se, except for kind of the situation with the priests of Direct, but we kind of already know what happens. Banishtar comes to the conclusion of what happened, I believe, by the end of the book. But I'm not gonna say in case that was something mentioned in a different book and I'm forgetting. But the master investigator coming to his own conclusion, it almost has a little bit of irony to what happened with Hellion, Herb, and Breathless. The fact that they're breathy, the fact that they get sent to the front lines, even though they did the best job they could with what information they had. It's even more ironic because it's mentioned that they are not allowed in those churches. So how could she have even known something was going on, um, or that there were dead bodies in there? So that was definitely interesting. But the spider imagery with the traps is probably where the most parallels can be drawn between the prologue, epilogue, and the text. Um, and what I mean by everything in this book being a trap, I mean most of the significant events, or the starting and ending events of the book. So I think the most obvious to jump out at anybody would probably be Yigatan, because Leomin just led the Malazans into a trap. I mean, it's as plain as that. He baited them into a siege just so he could blow the city up, torch everybody, and he escaped. So that was probably the most obvious of the traps. One of them actually does get spoken. You see it start, you see the trap get set in the prologue, and that's when Barathol Mekar finds those Talana masks outside of his small random village in 7 cities. And obviously, those were the 7 of the Deadfires, the Unchained from the later on plateau, God of the Teblor. But they were laying in wait there, presumably under the orders of the crippled god, in order to kill Heberic Light-Touched, and also to grab Felicin Younger, because they wanted to install her as the new Shaik. Um, Shaik Shaik youngest is what I'll call her, but of the new cult of the apocalypse and the new whirlwind that's forming after the real whirlwind died, the original one. Dryginna's apocalypse died, but and the rebellion's over, obviously. Um, Another trap would obviously be the ending of the book itself is a trap. Lysine, in a sense, is snared at the end of this book because of the fact that she has Malik Rel and Corbolo Dom at her sides. And as we know, Malik Rel is not a good. He doesn't have any interest in actually doing anything good for the Malazan Empire, as far as we can see. And that's definitely the same for Corbolo Dom, who fought against the Malazans. I gotta tell you, I was pretty damn mad when I found out he was the first sword of the Empire at the end of this book. I mean, that's some messed up stuff right there. That he did all that to the Wiccans and everything. But that was a trap that Lysine is kind of ensnared in, almost like a bear trap that she's already stuck in, and she's just slowly keeping her grip. I don't know how long that can last. Obviously, I haven't read. I'm not going to talk about anything past the Bone Hunters, but I still don't know what she's going to do. Anything about that? I haven't read any of the side books if they go into detail about those kind of situations, but that's its own trap, as well as uh, Malaz Island itself was a trap for the Bone Hunters, for the Wiccans. I mean, they go in, and Malik Rel's just like, oh, well, the people want blood, and who better than the Wiccans? It sucks that it's the Wiccans. They helped us, but I mean, if it satiates the people, and you can just tell that Malik Rel is the slimiest man of all, and I just imagine him as the pudgiest, most disgusting looking human I could ever think of. I'm just all priest, but but beyond that, there's also Kalam's whole fight, Kalam, Tavor, and to Amber or Tamber's fight throughout the city. I always say Tamber or to Amber, but their fight throughout the city is a series of ambushes laid by the Claw, in charged by Pearl, and then furthermore. That spider imagery really comes up, not just the trap imagery of the spiders, but also the actual Peralt spiders themselves, because Pearl uses Peralt venom to kill Kalam Mekar. So that was definitely a parallel that I drew. And there's a lot of traps in this book that are also unintentional, in my opinion. Like they're traps that like weren't set by anybody, but people fell into regardless. Like Pearl's gloating or vanity almost, or his triumphant attitude after killing Kalam Mekar was a trap in and of itself because it leads him to take Kalam Mekar's daggers. Kalam does not use magic. He uses anti-magic. He has no Tatarol dagger. And as Pearl tries to run away from an assassin who's much better than him, he tries to reach into his warren to escape, and he's just incapable of doing it because he's carrying Clam's Otatarol dagger. So that was a trap that he put himself into, which I found quite interesting, especially for Pearl's story. Um, I have to say, specifically for his, I actually was kind of sad to see him die. I don't know if I would say I like Pearl, but he was definitely enjoyable to read, and I did feel quite bad that he thought the entire time that uh his Solara, no, she's one of the Red Blades, that he thought the love of his life died, which was just it was a sad plot line in my opinion. I remember reading it and I was distraught. Obviously she survived, and it was very poetic that she's the one who killed him and he didn't even know, because the Peralt venom swallows your eyes shut and all your orifices, and it's excruciatingly painful. I feel bad for Clam. I really hope that Shadow Throne was in time with throwing him into that dead house in Malaz City. The same as I think they mentioned that Dassam Ultor's daughter is stuck inside of Tremolor, the Azoth house in Raraku. But the Holy Desert. But the entire book is just laid with these traps, and it felt like everything was sort of just a uh something laid in wait for somebody else with the Seven of the Dead Fires, Yigatan, Malaz City, the assassins throughout the book. And another really interesting trap that's sort of the second part of this story is what happens with Dejim Nebral, the Torobaral, as well as the Daragoth. Obviously, in House of Chains, two of the Daragoth die. Kars Orlong kills them, which is, definitely a feat of strength since the Daragoth are ascendants, I believe. But obviously, the rest of them are freed at the beginning of this book, and the prologue also deals with the freeing of Dejim Nebral, the Toroboral of the First Empire of Decim Blackus. And he is a trap that is laid out for Mappo Runt and Icarium in order to separate Mappo from Icarium so that Terralac Veed can take up his position as his companion. And take him on a course to go to Lether to fight the Emperor of 1,000 Deaths. Um, that was an interesting trap. But then it's interesting because Dejim Nebral is then subsequently trapped in odd ways because the Daragoth are freed and they're sent after him and they carry him to Poliel, who herself is trapped by Ganos Pran, who sort of planned all of this. Killing two birds with one stone almost. Maybe three birds with one stone, because we don't quite understand everything with the Hounds of Darkness. But obviously he throws the piece of Artatarol at Poliel, which anchors her to the material realm in Gadana's ban, where the Toroborals brought the last of the Ivers, and the Ivers. And the Daragoth obviously kill both Dejim Nebral as well as Poliel. Definitely a brilliant plan by Ganos Pran. I wouldn't expect anything other from the Master of the Deck of Dragons. Um, I don't actually remember very much of what Paran was like in not Memories of Ice. I don't really remember what he was like in Gardens of the Moon, which I believe is where most of his stuff is, since he's the prologue of the entire series. But ironically enough, all I remember is his relationship with Tattersail. I remember a very odd scene describing them having a little bit of playful banter and then whisking away to a bedroom together. And then I remember him briefly speaking with Adjunct Lorne before she died, as well as the Son of Darkness, Animander Rake, and who I believe is Draconus inside of Dragnipper for a little bit, which was definitely interesting. But that was definitely a good character growth, I should say, for Ganos, which was him going from being this guy that the gods are constantly trying to control to kind of the guy they have to listen to, because as it's mentioned throughout the third book, um, he is playing with this idea of allowing the House of Change to come into existence, because that would force the crippled god to play by everybody else's rules. But that was definitely interesting in its own right. But his trap laid out was very interesting, and that's another parallel I drew from all the spider and trap imageries throughout the prologue and the epilogue. And I really feel like the final line of this book really wrapped up the entire book very nicely, um, in saying the traps were set, and in their elaborate elegance, they were never empty for long. I might have phrased that not quite right, but it really, to me, it's the perfect ending for any of the books because it reminds you of what this book was. It was a series of tactful plays and um, ensnarements that every side created for every other side. I mean, there's a myriad of angles you could view it from, and especially that the series is viewed from, as well as the fact that there's not just two sides. It's sort of everybody has their own agendas and their own things that they're working towards. You have the crippled god, and you have the Seven of the Dead Fires, and all of his things going on. You have the nameless ones in this book are pretty important because of the trap that they set for Mappo Runt with the Torobarol. which in turn forces Ganos Paran to free the Daragoth in order to trap him and Poly on Gadanisban. And um, Seven Cities itself feels like a big trap in this book, especially with the coming of the plague, because Polyal is descended on Gadanisban. And her infecting the entire continent with blue tongue makes the entire continent sort of a ticking time bomb. And bombs are kind of traps in themselves, even if this isn't a literal bomb, a Granado. But that's kind of the feeling I got from it, is that Seven Cities itself is a trap for the Malazans, just as Yucatan is a trap for the Malazans, and the fact that Dasim Ultra died there and a tide of Malazan blood has been spilt there. Although I think it's stated by Leoman early in the book that he does not believe, or he straight up knows, that Dasim Ultra did not die there, and that he believes he ascended to become Decembre, the Lord of Tragedy, which would kind of fit because Decembre and Dasim are kind of similar-ish names. I don't know anything about that, but all I know is what's occurred in this book. But that's what I wanted to talk about with the prologue and the epilogue. I thought they were really good. I really like how they relate to the text of this book, very heavily, more so than any of the others, in my opinion. And I thought that that final line was the perfect wrap up. And I also feel like it's going to be very indicative of what the rest of the series is. I mean, the crippled god's plans are fickle. We don't really know what he's trying to do everywhere, especially on Lether. So, which I have a feeling is where the series is going to sort of shift towards for the ending, based off of where I believe the Bonehunters went. Um, so I'm very excited for that, and I do believe that it's going to be indicative of everything that's to come. I feel like there's more traps. As the final line says, they're set and they're never empty for long. So that's my opinion, or my theory for the rest of the series. But that's what I love so much about the prologue and the epilogue of the Bone Hunters. Um, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope that maybe you took away something from it, or you realized something that you didn't, or you just enjoyed it. Um, so thank you for watching, and I hope you have a good day.